The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of dust, its wheels grinding against the parched earth of Promise Creek, Wyoming Territory. Miriam Foster clutched her worn leather satchel with white-knuckled fingers and drew in a shaky breath, watching as the other passengers disembarked. Unlike them, she had no one waiting to greet her, only a future husband she'd never met, and the weight of her family's expectations pressing down upon her shoulders like an invisible yoke. The year was 1875, and at 22, Miriam had made the journey west from Boston with nothing but a handful of letters from one Mr. Harold Blackwood, a prosperous rancher seeking a bride from back east. 3 months of correspondence had culminated in a proposal, a train ticket, and the promise of a new life far from the cramped confines of her parents' home, where she'd become an unwelcome burden after her father's business failures. "This is it, miss," the driver called down, tossing her second valise to the ground with casual disregard. "Promise Creek. End of the line for you." Miriam nodded, adjusting her bonnet against the glare of the afternoon sun. Promise Creek hardly looked promising, a dusty main street lined with weather-beaten buildings, horses hitched to posts, and men in various states of trail-worn disarray moving between the general store, bank, and saloon. "Thank you," she said, gathering her courage along with her belongings. The driver merely grunted in response before turning his attention to unloading the mail. A tall, portly man in a black suit approached, his beard neatly trimmed and his watch chain glinting in the sunlight. "Miss Foster, Miriam Foster," she straightened her back. "Yes, that's me." "Harold Blackwood." He extended a hand but didn't quite meet her eyes. "Welcome to Promise Creek." His handshake was limp, his palm soft, not what she'd expected from a man who described himself as taming the Wyoming wilderness. He looked her up and down with an appraising gaze that made her skin crawl. He cleared his throat. "You're smaller than I expected," Miriam bristled. "I believe I mentioned my height in my letters, Mr. Blackwood." Yes, of course," he waved dismissively. "My wagon's this way." "We have a ways to travel before nightfall." As they walked, Miriam noticed the sidelong glances Blackwood cast her way, his expression growing increasingly troubled. His wagon was well appointed but dusty, with a team of matched bay horses that seemed the most impressive thing about him. "Your letters were very well written," he said as he helped her up. "Your penmanship is excellent. Thank you. I was a schoolteacher in Boston before." "Yes, you mentioned that." He cut her off, climbing up beside her. "I hope you understand that out here, a woman's duties are different. My ranch needs a woman's touch, cooking, cleaning, mending." "Of course," Miriam replied carefully. "Though I hope there might be opportunities to put my education to use as well. Perhaps teaching the local children or—" Blackwood laughed, the sound short and dismissive. "There's barely a school in Promise Creek, Miss Foster. Most families here value practical skills over book learning." The wagon lurched forward, and Miriam gripped the wooden seat. The conversation dwindled as they left town behind, the landscape opening up into rolling prairie dotted with sagebrush. Mountains loomed purple and distant on the horizon, and for a moment, despite her companion's chilly demeanor, Miriam felt a surge of wonder at the vastness of this new country. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It's harsh," Blackwood corrected. "Beautiful doesn't feed cattle or grow crops." They rode in silence for nearly an hour before he spoke again. "I should tell you that my mother lives with me. She's been managing the household since my wife passed 5 years ago." This was news. "You never mentioned your mother in your letters, Mr. Blackwood." "Didn't I? Well, she's there all the same. She'll show you your duties." The sun was low in the sky when they finally turned down a long drive toward a sprawling ranch house. It was larger than Miriam had expected, with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered around it. A windmill creaked lazily nearby, and cattle dotted the distant pastures. "Blackwood Ranch," Harold announced with evident pride. 2,000 acres and growing. As they approached, an older woman emerged onto the porch, her gray hair pulled back severely, her dress plain but immaculate. Her expression was as unwelcoming as the winter wind. "Mother," Harold called as he brought the wagon to a stop. "This is Miss Foster, Mrs." Blackwood descended the steps with regal slowness, her gaze coolly assessing. "So this is the Boston girl." "Mrs. Blackwood," Miriam nodded politely, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." The older woman ignored the outstretched hand. "Harold, help with her things. Supper's getting cold." Inside, the house was well furnished but austere, lacking any feminine touches beyond severe practicality. Over a silent meal of roast beef and potatoes, Miriam attempted conversation only to be met with terse replies from Harold and disapproving looks from his mother. "Miss Foster was a schoolteacher," Harold finally offered. Mrs. Blackwood's lips thinned. "Is that so? Well, we've little use for that here. Can you cook?" "Yes, though perhaps not to Western tastes yet. I'm eager to learn, and so." Harold goes through shirts like water. "I can sew, yes." The older woman cut another piece of beef. "Early rising is essential here. Breakfast at 5. Harold likes his eggs fresh and his coffee strong." "I see," Miriam said, meeting the woman's gaze directly. "And what are your preferences, Mrs. Blackwood?" Something flickered in the older woman's eyes, surprise, perhaps. "My preferences are for a well-run household, Miss Foster, something I've maintained for 30 years. After dinner, Harold showed Miriam to a small bedroom off the kitchen. "You'll stay here until the wedding," he said awkwardly. "Mother thought it best." "When will that be?" Miriam asked, setting down her valise. "We'll discuss that tomorrow. Rest now. Morning comes early." Alone finally, Miriam sank onto the narrow bed and allowed herself a moment of doubt. This was not the welcome she'd imagined, nor was Harold Blackwood the man his letters had suggested. His correspondence had been articulate, even charming. The man himself was neither, but she had nowhere else to go. Her return ticket money had been spent on the proper clothes for a rancher's wife, and her parents had made it clear there was no place for her in Boston anymore. She would make this work. She had to. The next morning began before dawn with Mrs. Blackwood rapping sharply on her door. "Up, girl. Chickens won't feed themselves." The day passed in a whirlwind of chores, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, learning the kitchen's organization under Mrs. Blackwood's critical eye, and preparing 3 meals for the ranch hands as well as the family. By evening, Miriam's hands were raw and her back ached, but she refused to complain. "You missed a spot," Mrs. Blackwood said, pointing to a corner of the dining table Miriam had just polished. "So I did," Miriam agreed, returning to wipe it again. "You're not what Harold expected," the older woman said bluntly. Miriam straightened. "In what way, your letters?" Harold had them read to him. Miriam froze. "Read to him, you mean?" "My son is a successful rancher, Miss Foster, not a scholar." His business partner helped with the correspondence. "Harold can't read." Miriam's mind raced, reassessing everything. "He recognizes enough words to get by," Mrs. Blackwood said defensively, "but fancy writing isn't necessary for success out here." "I see." And she did see why her references to books had gone unanswered, why her questions about his thoughts on education had been deflected. "He's a good man," Mrs. Blackwood continued. "Hard-working. You'd want for nothing as his wife." Except conversation, Miriam thought but didn't say. That evening, Harold returned from the range later than usual. Miriam had just finished washing the supper dishes when he appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Walk with me," he said, not quite a request. Outside, the evening was cooling rapidly, stars beginning to prick the darkening sky. They walked in silence toward the corral where several horses dozed on their feet. "Mother says you did well today," Harold finally said. "I tried to be helpful." He nodded, staring at the horses rather than at her. "I've been thinking, Miss Foster. This arrangement, it may not be suitable after all." Miriam's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, He searched for words. "You're not what I expected. Too educated, too—" "Too what, Mr. Blackwood? Stubborn," he said finally. "You questioned Mother about changing the dinner menu. Suggested a different way to organize the pantry. That's not how things work here." "I merely thought, that's just it," he interrupted. "You think too much. Have too many ideas. A ranch wife follows her husband's lead, Miss Foster. She doesn't question or suggest or improve." Anger flared in Miriam's chest. "So you brought me 2,000 miles to tell me I'm too opinionated. I'll arrange for your return passage," he said stiffly. "There's a stage on Thursday." "And where am I to go?" Miriam demanded. "My family can't take me back. I spent everything I had to come here." Harold shifted uncomfortably. "There's a women's boarding house in Cheyenne. They take in unfortunate women. I can pay for a month's lodging. Unfortunate women." Miriam knew exactly what that meant: women with no other options, waiting to be hired as maids or cooks or worse. "I see." She fought to keep her voice steady. "And this is your final decision?" "It is," he said, some relief evident in his voice. "Mother agrees." "You're not suited to ranch life, Miss Foster." Miriam turned away, blinking back hot tears of anger and humiliation. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." She spent a sleepless night weighing her options, which were painfully few. By morning she'd made her decision. When Mrs. Blackwood called her to breakfast, Miriam was already dressed, her hair neatly pinned beneath her bonnet. "I'll be leaving today," she announced as she entered the kitchen. "I won't impose on your hospitality any longer." Harold looked up from his eggs, surprised. "The stage doesn't come until Thursday. I'll find my own way back to town." Miriam's voice was steady. "If I could trouble you for the loan of a horse, I'll have it returned tomorrow." "Don't be ridiculous," Mrs. Blackwood snapped. "A woman alone is precisely what I am," Miriam finished. "And what I'll continue to be. I'd rather face that truth directly than linger where I'm unwanted." Harold rose awkwardly. "I'll have one of the hands drive you in the wagon." "Thank you." Miriam nodded coolly. An hour later, she found herself perched beside a weathered ranch hand named Jeb, her valises secured in the back of the wagon as they set off for Promise Creek. "Been with the Blackwoods long?" she asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. 3 years, Jeb replied, keeping his eyes on the trail. "Best pay around these parts, I see. Shame about you leaving so quick. Boys had a bet going on how long you'd last with the old battle axe." Despite everything, Miriam laughed. "Mrs. Blackwood is formidable." "Like a rattlesnake in a calico dress," Jeb agreed, then looked embarrassed. "Begging your pardon, miss. No offense taken." They rode in companionable silence for a while before Jeb spoke again. "What'll you do now?" "Find work," Miriam said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm a trained teacher. Surely someone needs education around here." Jeb looked doubtful but said nothing. Promise Creek looked even less promising in the harsh morning light. Jeb deposited her outside the town's only hotel, tipping his hat as he left. The hotel clerk eyed her suspiciously when she requested a room. "Alone, miss?" "Yes, we don't usually." He hesitated. "Respectable ladies don't typically travel unaccompanied." Miriam placed her last gold coin on the counter. "Will this address your concerns about my respectability?" The clerk's demeanor changed instantly. "Room 3, top of the stairs. Breakfast included." By afternoon, Miriam had assessed her situation with brutal honesty. She had enough money for perhaps a week at the hotel. After that, her options narrowed dramatically. The town had a small school, but the teacher's position was filled by the minister's wife. The general store wasn't hiring. The saloon was. Not an option she was willing to consider. On her third circuit of the town's businesses, Miriam paused outside a small office with a newly painted sign. A. Dawson, cattle broker and land agent. Through the window, she could see a man bent over a ledger, his pen moving steadily across the page. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The man looked up, startled. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sun-browned skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned face. "Madam," he rose quickly, revealing an impressive height. "I apologize for the interruption," Miriam said. "I'm inquiring about employment opportunities." The man blinked. "Employment? Here? Yes, I understand you may not need assistance, but I'm new to town and seeking work." "I see," he gestured to a chair. "Please sit. I'm Adam Dawson, Miriam Foster." She sat primly, hands folded in her lap. "I'm a trained teacher from Boston, but I'm willing to consider any respectable position." Adam Dawson studied her with undisguised curiosity. "A Boston teacher in Promise Creek? That's unusual." "I was to be married," Miriam admitted. "The arrangement fell through." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Blackwood?" Miriam's surprise must have shown on her face because he continued. "Small town. Word travels fast, especially when Harold Blackwood sends his mail-order bride packing after one day." Miriam felt her cheeks burn. "I see my reputation precedes me." "For what it's worth," Adam said quietly, "Harold Blackwood is a fool and his mother is a terror. No one lasts long in that household." The simple kindness in his voice almost undid her composure. Miriam swallowed hard. "Be that as it may, I find myself in need of work. I can raid, write, keep accounts, or perform any office duties you might require." Adam leaned back in his chair, considering. "Truth is, Miss Foster, I could use some help. This business is growing faster than I can manage alone, but it's not teaching. Mostly correspondence, bookkeeping, sometimes translating contracts for the Mexican ranchers south of here." "You speak Spanish?" Miriam asked, impressed. "Enough to get by, do you?" "I do, actually. French as well." Adam's eyebrows rose. "Well now, that would be useful indeed." He tapped his fingers on the desk thoughtfully. "The position would be temporary, mind you, until you find something more suitable." "I understand." Relief flooded through her. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning." 8 o'clock. "I'll be here," Miriam promised, rising. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." "Adam, please." He stood as well, extending his hand. "Welcome to Promise Creek, Miss Foster. For real this time." His handshake was firm, his palm calloused the hand of a man who worked, despite his polished office and neat attire. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Miriam felt a flicker of hope. That flicker almost extinguished the next morning when she arrived at the office to find the door locked and no sign of Adam Dawson. She waited on the small porch, growing increasingly concerned as the minutes ticked by. Had this been some elaborate joke? Another rejection. Just as she was about to leave, a horse thundered down the street, its rider urging it on with quiet commands. Adam Dawson pulled the lathered animal to a stop in front of the office, swinging down with fluid grace. "Miss Foster." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair damp with sweat. "My sincere apologies. Emergency at the Miller place having gone wrong." Miriam blinked, taking in his appearance. Gone was yesterday's neat businessman. Today he wore leather chaps over denim trousers, a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and boots caked with substances she preferred not to identify. "You're a cattle broker," she said carefully. "And a veterinarian," Adam laughed, unlocking the office door. Former ranch hand. Old habits die hard. The Millers have been good to me, couldn't leave them in the lurch. He held the door for her. Give me 10 minutes to make myself presentable. True to his word, Adam reappeared from the back room in a clean shirt and trousers, his hair damp from washing. Now then, Miss Foster. Let me show you what needs doing. The day passed in a whirlwind of instruction. Adam's business, Miriam discovered, was far more complex than she'd initially assumed. He not only brokered cattle sales between ranchers and eastern buyers, but also negotiated land purchases, advised on grazing rights, and occasionally mediated disputes between neighboring properties. Most folk around here can't read contracts well enough to protect themselves, he explained as he showed her his filing system. I try to ensure everyone gets a fair deal. That's commendable, Miriam said, genuinely impressed, but surely not always profitable. Adam shrugged. I sleep better at night. By mid-afternoon, Miriam had reorganized his correspondence system, drafted responses to 3 inquiries, and begun translating a property agreement for a rancher named Alejandro Vasquez. This is excellent work, Adam said, reviewing her translation. Your Spanish is better than mine. Thank you. Miriam couldn't help but feel pleased. Though I'm sure I'd be lost in conversation, my accent is atrocious. We'll have to test that theory sometime, Adam replied with a smile that transformed his serious face. Vasquez throws the best fiestas in the territory. As she was preparing to leave for the day, the office door burst open, admitting a red-faced Harold Blackwood. Dawson, he bellowed, then stopped short at the sight of Miriam. What is she doing here? Adam rose slowly. Miss Foster works for me now, Harold. What can I do for you? Works for, Harold sputtered. She was supposed to be on a stage to Cheyenne. Change of plans, Miriam said calmly, though her heart was racing. Mr. Dawson has kindly offered me employment. Harold turned on Adam. What kind of game are you playing, Dawson? You know damn well she was meant for me, meant for you. Adam's voice was dangerously quiet. She's a person, Blackwood, not a package delivery. I paid good money to bring her out here. And I'll reimburse your expenses, Adam replied coolly. Send me the bill. Harold's face darkened further. This isn't about money, it's about respect. You've stolen my Mr. Blackwood, Miriam interrupted, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. I am not property to be stolen. You rejected me, if you'll recall. I've simply found alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements, Harold repeated mockingly. Is that what they're calling it now? Living in sin with... Adam moved so quickly Miriam barely saw it happen. One moment he was behind his desk, the next he had Harold by the shirt front, backed against the wall. Choose your next words very carefully, Adam said, his voice soft but menacing. Miss Foster is under my employment and my protection, nothing more. Suggest otherwise again and we'll settle this outside. Harold's bravado evaporated. Let go of me, Dawson. Adam released him, stepping back. We're done here. Good day, Blackwood. After Harold stormed out, slamming the door behind him, an uncomfortable silence fell over the office. I'm sorry about that, Adam finally said, straightening his vest. Blackwood has always had an inflated sense of entitlement. Miriam was still processing what had happened. He seemed to think you orchestrated this somehow. Adam looked genuinely surprised. Me? How would I have arranged for his mail-order bride to be unsuitable? Perhaps because you knew I would be too stubborn for his tastes. The accusation slipped out before she could stop it. Miss Foster, Adam said carefully, until yesterday, I'd never laid eyes on you. Harold Blackwood has gone through 3 potential brides in the last year. None of them measured up to his mother's impossible standards. Shame washed over Miriam. I apologize. That was unfair. No harm done, he hesitated. Though this does present a complication. Promise Creek runs on gossip, and Blackwood will be spreading his version of events by supper time. Miriam's heart sank. My reputation, and by extension, the reputation of this business, Adam agreed grimly. I hate to ask this, but perhaps it would be better if I found employment elsewhere, Miriam finished for him, trying to mask her disappointment. I understand completely. What? No. Adam looked horrified. I was going to suggest we be more public with our professional relationship. Make it clear to everyone that this is a proper business arrangement. Oh, Miriam felt foolish. Of course, that makes sense. We could start by having you take lunch at the hotel dining room where you can be seen working on correspondence. Perhaps I could escort you there and back, make it all above board. The relief of not losing her position warred with the practical concerns of her situation. Mr. Dawson, Adam, I appreciate your consideration, but I should tell you that my stay at the hotel is limited by my finances. I have perhaps 3 more nights before I'll need to find other accommodations. Adam frowned. There's nowhere suitable in Promise Creek for a single woman. The boarding house is. He trailed off. For unfortunate women, Miriam supplied. So I've heard. Adam paced the small office. There is another option. Mrs. Abernathy, the widow who owns the millinery shop, has a spare room she sometimes rents to respectable women. She's particular, but if I speak to her on your behalf, you would do that, of course. His expression was earnest. You're doing me a favor with your skills, Miss Foster. The least I can do is help you get settled properly. That evening, Miriam found herself taking tea in the cozy apartment above the millinery shop, being scrutinized by a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s. So you're the Boston girl who was too much for a leaner Blackwood, Mrs. Abernathy said, pouring tea with a steady hand. Good for you. That woman has terrorized this town for 20 years. Miriam nearly choked on her tea. You don't approve of the Blackwoods. Harold's decent enough when his mother isn't pulling his strings, Mrs. Abernathy conceded. But that woman would try the patience of a saint. She set down her cup. Adam Dawson speaks highly of you, says you're educated and hardworking. Mr. Dawson has been very kind. Kind isn't the word most used for Adam, Mrs. Abernathy said with a knowing look. Honest, fair, stubborn as a mule but rarely kind. He must see something special in you. Miriam felt her cheeks warm. We have a purely professional relationship. Of course you do, Mrs. Abernathy agreed smoothly. And that's how it'll stay while you're under my roof. I run a respectable house, Miss Foster. No gentlemen callers in private, home by 9, church on Sundays. Those terms are perfectly acceptable, Miriam assured her. Then you can move in tomorrow. $5 a week includes breakfast and dinner. She held out her hand to seal the arrangement. Miriam shook it, relief washing over her. Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't. But there was a twinkle in the older woman's eye. And call me Ethel. We independent women should stick together. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Miriam worked at Adam's office during the day, taking lunch at the hotel dining room as suggested, and returned to Mrs. Abernathy's by nightfall. On Sundays, she attended the small wooden church with her landlady, gradually meeting other townspeople. The work itself was satisfying in ways teaching had never been. Adam trusted her judgment, valued her input, and seemed genuinely impressed by her abilities. Their professional relationship developed into something like friendship, with easy conversation and occasional laughter brightening the workday. You've transformed this place, Adam commented one afternoon, gesturing around the now orderly office. I can actually find things now. Organization is merely another form of education, Miriam replied, finishing a letter to a cattle buyer in Chicago. Speaking of which, Mr. Vasquez's contract is ready for review. Adam leaned against her desk, crossing his arms. You're wasted on correspondence, you know. You should be running your own business. Women don't typically run businesses, Mr. Dawson. Maybe they should. His gaze was thoughtful. Promise Creek has no proper school. The minister's wife does her best, but she's hardly trained. The town council has been discussing hiring a real teacher. Miriam looked up sharply. Are you serious? Absolutely. They've even set aside funds to convert the old assay office into a schoolhouse. He hesitated. Would that interest you if I put your name forward? Yes, Miriam said immediately, then tempered her enthusiasm. Though I'm not sure the council would consider me suitable, given the circumstances of my arrival. Leave that to me, Adam said with a confidence that both reassured and unsettled her. We'll need to work on your reputation in town first. Get more people to know the real Miriam Foster. And how do you propose we do that? Adam grinned. The Founders' Day social is next weekend. The whole town will be there. Perfect opportunity to introduce you properly. The social was held on the grounds of the church, with tables laden with food, a small band playing lively tunes, and nearly everyone in Promise Creek in attendance. Adam appeared at Mrs. Abernathy's promptly at noon to escort both women to the event. You look lovely, he said when Miriam emerged in her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the gray in her eyes. Thank you, she replied, suddenly shy. Is it appropriate? Perfectly so, Mrs. Abernathy assured her, adjusting her own bonnet. Though I notice Mr. Dawson has dressed for the occasion as well. Indeed, Adam had abandoned his usual work attire for a dark suit and crisp white shirt, his unruly hair tamed for once. He offered an arm to each woman. Shall we, ladies? The social was both better and worse than Miriam had anticipated. Better because many townspeople were genuinely welcoming, introducing themselves and expressing interest in her background. Worse because a leaner Blackwood held court among a group of older women, their disapproving glances following Miriam everywhere. Don't mind them, Adam murmured as he brought her a cup of punch. The old guard always resists change. I'm hardly revolutionary, Miriam protested. Just a woman trying to make her way. In Promise Creek, that's revolutionary enough. His smile was warm. Come, there's someone I want you to meet. He led her to where a distinguished older man was conversing with several townspeople. Judge Porter, may I introduce Miss Miriam Foster? Miss Foster, Judge William Porter, head of our town council. The judge was tall and thin, with kind eyes and a scholarly air. Miss Foster, I've heard good things about your work with young Dawson here. You're too kind, Your Honor, Miriam replied, surprised by the friendly reception. Not at all. Adam tells me you were a teacher back east. Yes, for 3 years in Boston. Fascinating. We've been discussing educational needs here in Promise Creek. Perhaps you'd share your thoughts someday. I would be honored, Miriam said, hardly believing her luck. The conversation continued pleasantly until a commotion near the food tables drew their attention. Harold Blackwood, red-faced and unsteady, was arguing loudly with another man. Excuse me, Judge Porter sighed. Duty calls. As he walked away, Adam frowned. Blackwood's been drinking. This won't end well. His prediction proved accurate. As they watched, Harold lurched away from the judge's intervention, his angry gaze finding Miriam across the gathering. He started toward them, pushing past other guests. There she is, he slurred loudly. The Boston lady who thinks she's too good for honest ranchers. Adam stepped slightly in front of Miriam. Go home, Blackwood, sleep it off. Don't tell me what to do, Dawson. Harold jabbed a finger at Adam's chest. You stole what was mine, Mr. Blackwood, Miriam said firmly, stepping around Adam. You're making a scene. "This isn't the place for shut your mouth, woman," Harold snapped. "Stubborn, uppity females like you need to learn your place." The crowd had gone silent, watching the confrontation with avid interest. Miriam felt dozens of eyes on her, judging, assessing. "My place," she said clearly, "is wherever I choose to make it, not where you or anyone else assigns me." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Harold's face darkened further. "You see," he demanded of the crowd. Defiant, unnatural. "No proper woman speaks to a man this way." "Enough, Harold." This from Judge Porter, who had returned with the sheriff. "You're drunk and disorderly. Time to go home." "Not until she admits the truth," Harold insisted. "Tell them, Miss Foster. Tell them how you tempted me with your letters, made promises you never intended to keep." Miriam felt a cold anger replace her embarrassment. "The only promise I made was to be a good wife to a decent man. You proved yourself neither decent nor a man when you rejected me for having opinions of my own." A few gasps, then someone Miriam thought it might be Mrs. Abernathy began to applaud. Others joined in, and Harold found himself facing a suddenly hostile audience. "Come along, Blackwood," the sheriff said, taking his arm firmly. "Your mother's waiting to take you home." As Harold was led away, still protesting, Miriam became aware of Adam standing beside her, his expression a mixture of concern and something like pride. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, surprised to find it was true. "Actually, I feel liberated." Adam laughed. "You're something else, Miriam Foster." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Word of her confrontation with Harold spread quickly, and rather than condemning her, many of the townspeople seemed impressed by her composure. By the time Adam escorted her and Mrs. Abernathy home, Miriam had received invitations to 2 sewing circles and a ladies' auxiliary meeting. "You made quite an impression," Adam said as they paused at Mrs. Abernathy's door. "For standing up to a drunk." Miriam shook her head. "Hardly an achievement." "For standing up for yourself," he corrected. "That's rarer than you might think, especially out here." Mrs. Abernathy tactfully busied herself with her door key, giving them a moment of privacy. "Thank you for today," Miriam said. "Despite everything, I enjoyed myself, as did I." Adam hesitated, then spoke quickly. "Would you consider accompanying me to dinner tomorrow at the hotel?" Miriam blinked in surprise. "Dinner? Not as my employee," he clarified. "As well as my guest. People will talk," she warned, though her heart had begun to race. "Let them." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I find I don't much care what they say, do you?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Miriam thought of all she'd risked coming west, all she'd endured since arriving. What was one more risk? "No," she said finally. "I don't care what they say either." Adam's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'll call for you at 6. As summer progressed into fall, Miriam's position in Promise Creek underwent a remarkable transformation. What had begun as scandal gradually gave way to acceptance, and eventually, respect. Her work with Adam flourished, bringing organization and expansion to his business. More importantly, Judge Porter had indeed consulted her about educational matters, leading to a formal offer from the town council. "They want me to open the school after Christmas," she told Adam one crisp October afternoon as they rode back from visiting a client's ranch. "Full salary, with boarding included at the new teacherage they're building behind the schoolhouse." Adam guided his horse closer to hers. "That's wonderful news, Miriam, though I'll be lost without you at the office." Their relationship had evolved in the months since the Founders' Day social. Weekly dinners had become regular outings, then daily walks, their professional partnership blossoming into something deeper neither had yet named aloud. "You'll manage," she teased. You did before I arrived. Barely, he admitted. I've grown rather dependent on your organizational skills. And your company. Something in his tone made her look over. Adam's expression was thoughtful, almost troubled. Is something wrong? She asked. No, he said quickly. Just thinking about the future. He changed the subject. Race you to that cottonwood. Before she could respond, he urged his horse forward, and Miriam laughed as she gave chase. Adam had taught her to ride properly over the summer, and while she wasn't as skilled as he was, she'd become comfortable in the saddle. They reached the tree nearly together, both breathless and laughing. Adam dismounted smoothly, then reached up to help her down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Miriam felt the familiar flutter in her chest his touch always provoked. Miriam, he began, then stopped, suddenly hesitant. Yes. She prompted, aware of how alone they were, how close he stood. There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. He took her hands in his. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Her heart quickened. For me as well. When you came to Promise Creek, I never imagined. He shook his head, smiling. You've changed everything. How I see my work, this town, my future. Adam, please, let me finish before I lose my nerve. He took a deep breath. I know you value your independence. I know the school position offers you security and purpose. I would never ask you to give that up. Miriam's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, Miriam Foster. I love your stubborn spirit, your brilliant mind, your compassionate heart. And if you'll have me, I want to spend my life proving worthy of you. Tears welled in Miriam's eyes. Adam. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I'm not Harold Blackwood. I don't want a wife who will blindly obey or stay silent. I want a partner who will challenge me, improve me, stand beside me as my equal. He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. Your strength is what I admire most about you, Miriam. What others called stubborn, I call determined. What they saw as difficult, I recognize as principled. Miriam couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. Will you marry me? Adam asked simply. Not as my subordinate or my helper, but as my partner in everything. Yes, Miriam whispered through her tears. Yes, I will marry you, Adam Dawson. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then lifted her hands to his lips, kissing them reverently. You've made me the happiest man in Wyoming Territory. And I the happiest woman, she replied, reaching up to touch his face. Though I warn you, I intend to keep teaching. The children of Promise Creek deserve a proper education. Adam laughed, pulling her close. I wouldn't expect anything less, Miss Foster. Your stubborn dedication to improving this town is one of the many reasons I love you. And you? She asked, settling comfortably against his chest. Will you continue as a cattle broker? For now, he said thoughtfully. Though I've been considering expanding into property development, Promise Creek is growing. It needs housing, businesses. With your keen mind for planning and my connections, we could build something lasting together. Adam Dawson, Miriam said with a smile, I believe you're proposing a business partnership as well as marriage. Is that so terrible? He asked, suddenly uncertain. On the contrary, she replied, reaching up to kiss him softly. It's perfect, a true partnership in every sense. They were married on Christmas Eve in the newly completed schoolhouse, with Judge Porter officiating and the entire town in attendance even. Surprisingly, Harold Blackwood, now sober and somewhat humbled after his mother's passing that autumn. No hard feelings, Dawson, he said gruffly at the reception. You got yourself a fine woman, too fine for the likes of me as it turns out. Thank you, Harold, Adam replied, shaking the man's hand. That's generous of you to say. After the guests had departed and they were alone in Adam's house, Their house now. Miriam stood by the fireplace, watching the play of light on her wedding band. "Having second thoughts?" Adam asked, coming to stand beside her. "Not one," she assured him, leaning against his solid warmth. "Just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if Harold hadn't rejected me." "I would have found you eventually," Adam said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be, Mrs. Dawson." "Is that so, Mr. Dawson?" she teased, turning in his arms. "Absolutely." He kissed her tenderly. "The moment you walked into my office with your chin up and your back straight, demanding work on your own terms, I was lost. And here I thought you were merely being charitable." "There was nothing charitable about it," he admitted. "I recognized something in you that day, a spirit that matched my own, too stubborn to give up, too determined to settle for less than you deserved. My greatest flaw, according to the Blackwoods. Your greatest strength, according to your husband." Adam's eyes were serious. "Promise me you'll never lose that fire, Miriam. Never let anyone, not even me, dim that light inside you." "I promise," she whispered, "though I doubt you'd ever try." "Never," he vowed. "Your strength makes us both better." As snow fell softly outside, blanketing Promise Creek in pristine white, Miriam Foster Dawson reflected on the strange journey that had brought her west. What had begun as desperation had transformed into the greatest adventure of her life, leading her not to the security of a convenient marriage, but to true partnership with a man who valued rather than feared her determination. In the years that followed, the Dawsons became fixtures in Promise Creek's growth and development. Miriam's school flourished, eventually expanding to include a high school curriculum that prepared students for college back east. Adam's business ventures prospered, bringing new families and opportunities to the once sleepy town. They had children, 3 strong-willed daughters, who inherited their mother's stubbornness and their father's business acumen, and a son whose quiet intelligence complemented his siblings' more forceful personalities. All 4 grew up understanding that true partnership meant valuing each other's strengths rather than demanding conformity. On their 25th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home overlooking a Promise Creek that had grown into a proper small city, Adam took Miriam's hand, his fingers tracing the lines that years of work and living had etched there. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Blackwood had accepted you that first day?" he asked. Miriam smiled, watching their grandchildren playing in the yard. "Sometimes, but then I remember what you told me on our wedding night, that some things are meant to be." "Yes." She squeezed his hand. "My stubbornness would have eventually clashed with his expectations. We would have made each other miserable. Whereas I," Adam said, bringing her hand to his lips, "have been made immeasurably happy by that same quality." "My greatest strength," Miriam murmured. "Our greatest strength," Adam corrected. "Your determination and my vision working together. We built something here, Miriam, something that will outlast us both." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Miriam reflected that sometimes life's greatest disappointments led to its greatest joys. Being rejected for her stubborn spirit had ultimately brought her to the one man who would cherish that very quality, who would build a life with her based not on obedience, but on mutual respect and partnership. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train in Boston all those years ago. It was infinitely better.